welcome back to our celebrity series where we have conversations and musings with many of those who have sung with us or who wrote music for us. And I'm really delighted today to have a conversation with soprano, author, educator, Dr. Lynn Eustis, who has sung with the chorale on numerous occasions during my 25 years as music director and conductor. Some of her most recent memorable performances with us include Mendelssohn's Elijah in the fall of 2015 and Brahms' Requiem in the spring of 2018. Lynn's new book, A Singer's Epiphany, here it is right here, Faith, Music, and Mortality, is hot off the press. And I'll have Lynn in our chat tell you how you can get copies of it, because I know a lot of you might like to read it. Lynn is Director of Graduate Studies in Music at Boston University. She's also an Associate Professor of Voice. I'm proud to say that she's a Bucknell graduate in vocal performance. Ray Bucknell, you've got your orange on today too, which is great. And she sang with me all 4 years in my choirs, and it was just incredible to have her sing at that time in her life with me. And she might talk a little bit about her experiences and how that has moved her in other directions now, the experiences in choral singing. But let's get started right away, Lynn. As I said, I read your book last week, cover to cover, and you were diagnosed in January 2014 with a mid-level brain tumor, and you went through brain surgery and months of treatment, which eventually led you to writing this book. Your scope was faith, music, and mortality. So how did those three things kind of fit together for you as you were writing your book? Did you think of that all at once, or did that evolve?
Oh, it's a great question. Of course it evolved. At the time of the diagnosis, I would have said I was a person of faith before that. But one thing I really learned throughout the experience was that my faith was a lot stronger than I thought it was, and was a lot more important to me in terms of getting through everything. It was, people said later, you were so brave. And I think, well, you don't know what you're going to do until you go through something like that. And what are you going to do? You have to keep going somehow. So it was a major source of strength for me. And of course, music, music for many of us is a calling pretty similar to faith, I would say. It's so important to us in our lives. We feel called to do it. And of course, with all my students every day, I had to still figure out ways to relate with them and relate to my own performing. So it all sort of tied in. And of course, the first big performance I did right after the brain surgery was a performance of James Whitbourne's piece Annalise, the Anne Frank oratorio. So there I was singing, talk about bravery. That was, she really helped me get through it. It was a kind of a strange thing that piece, and it came up a few times during that big long year. And I did all those performances, and I it really provided perspective for me. So I started taking notes while I was in the hospital for this book, because I make sense of things by writing about them. And then later, having seen the diagnosis, I went looking for things to read about it, and I was looking for memoirs of people that had survived these, and I couldn't find any. And most of the memoirs that you see out there that deal with brain tumors are written by people who have lost loved ones to a brain tumor. So I basically set out to write the book that I wanted to see on the shelf. So I'm beyond excited that it's a real thing now. I keep looking. It only came out like about 2 weeks ago, so I'm still looking at it on the shelf, going, it's a real thing. And I'm even sure I could write it. And my friend Dan just said, you don't know until you try. So I tried,
That's right.
and here we are.
Congratulations. It's just, it's an amazing book. You talk about some of your doctors and caregivers in your book, Dr. Ullman, Dr. Stephen, and then friends and family that just came and were there for you. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Oh, sure. I mean, these doctors, my God, I'm so lucky that I live within walking distance of some of the best hospitals in the world, and that, I mean, I can literally walk to my hospital from where I live. I don't usually, but you can. When I was first diagnosed, one of the doctors that really helped me was a doctor named Dr. Christopher Stephen. He was a senior resident then in neurology, and he had been a singer, and he had sung in the choir at, I believe it was King's College, Cambridge. And he was very interested in me as a singer. And, that meant so much to me, because you're there as a patient, you're wearing the Johnny, you feel like you're not a real human being. And it was so gracious of him to treat me as somebody who was a professional, and I also happened to be a patient, so that meant a great deal to me. And I felt, he advocated for me quite a bit, and that was really sweet and helpful to me to have a fellow singer in the room for all of that. And then, of course, I was assigned a doctor for treatment, Dr. Eric Ullman, who's been my sort of spirit animal throughout this whole thing for years now. I see him all the time. Well, now I see him just once a year, which is, I love him, but I'd like to keep it that way. But for a while I was seeing him, every month, and it was, or sometimes more often. So he's been a very calm presence throughout the whole thing. And he's always treated me as a professional too. He thinks, and I think this is hilarious, he thinks that performing is harder than what he does for a living. And the man who cures brain tumors for a living, thinks that performing is harder, because he says you only have one chance. And I think, well, so do you. But it's very sweet of him to be as supportive as he is. And I had a hilarious conversation with him about this book just last month, just in August, when I saw him. We hadn't decided on a cover yet, and I was being a little picky about the covers that GIA was showing me, and I said, he said he was eager to see which cover we ended up with on the book, and I joked and said I could be stubborn, and I will get the one that I want, and he said, you can be strong. And I thought, he's my Yoda / neuro oncologist, because everyone needs one of those. But anyway, I think that GIA did a beautiful job. I love the cover, and I'm really super happy with how it turned out.
It's cool. In the months that followed your surgery, you went through many cycles of treatment, and you tried to hold your life together. I'm sure no one can imagine unless they've been through something like this. And during this time, you were encouraged to be really specific about your dreams for the future. And you said to a friend of yours that the Brahms Requiem was the last large piece on your wish list, your bucket list, whatever, because you had been fortunate enough to perform just about everything else for solo soprano. And I was touched to realize when I read this book that our SVC 2018 Brahms Requiem performance, which featured you as the soprano in that gorgeous solo, occurred just 4 years after your treatments, and that we were able to be a part of that dream of doing the Requiem in your bucket list. I remember thinking that this was probably the most exquisite performance of this touching solo that I had ever heard. And
Oh my gosh.
now I know why. You were singing from your heart, you were singing for the sheer love of it, and you were singing to communicate these beautiful words. Talk about that, if you
Oh
can.
my God. I am forever grateful to you for providing that last bucket list piece for me. Yeah, I was talking with a friend not long after, from who I went to Curtis with years ago, and we were talking about things that you want to do, and and he made the wise comment that, for all I was in my late 40s then, and he said, for all of us at that age, we're all looking at that, thinking what are the things we really want to do, and yours is maybe accelerated by your health situation, but and he asked about, what are the things left that you really want to sing? And that was really the only major thing that I still wanted to sing. And I remember talking with you at at someone's party after an Elijah performance, and you sort of saying, "Well, what are we doing next? And what would you really like to do?" And when I said that, and you said, "Oh, we can make that happen," I thought, "Oh my God, I hope so! Oh my God!" And then when you called and we actually did it, I was over the moon and just so happy. And of course, it means so much that it was with you, of course, because I started with you, and it was really me. Oh, I'm gonna get choked up. It was really
I
to me to do it, to perform that piece with you at the podium. It's a really tough piece, of course, too. And you want to do it with someone you trust wholeheartedly, not to kill you. And I knew you would not kill me either. So that's really great. So thank you.
oh, my pleasure, totally. We loved it. I love your inclusion of a quote by Beverly Sills.
Mhm.
She says, quote, "In my entire life, I sang the way I wanted to 6 times. The rest of the time, I just did the best I could." I thought that was great. How does that describe you now? At one point in the book, you say, real art only comes when you are willing to be something other than perfect. And so I think that kind of comes around to what Beverly Sills was saying as well. Um, how does that describe you at this point in your career, your life?
Well, I mean, I've always loved that quote. And of course, her best was pretty darn her when she was just doing the best that she could, that was pretty darn good too. So um I'm always impressed that she felt that way, because I know so many performers who feel like that. We do it as a career, and we do it so often that these performances can kind of blend together, and you it can become difficult to reckon with perfectionism and feeling like none of them are good enough. And there are going to be times that are good enough. There are going to be those magic times when everything lines up and you feel super happy with you're with the right conductor, you're with the right orchestra, it's the right piece at the right time for you, you got enough sleep that night, all the things align, and um everything comes out as you wanted it to. And that doesn't happen that many times. So I was really encouraged by her, of all people, saying that, because I'm just a huge fan and have always been a fan of hers. Um, and yeah, I can probably count about 6 times that I would say that was really what I want to do. And the Brahms, of course, is one of them. So I'm grateful for that. Um, but it also underlines something that became true for me after this diagnosis, was that I've struggled my whole life with perfectionism as a singer, and it for a long time, especially early on, it really hampered my ability to communicate the things that I felt inside, because I was so worried about every note and every this and every that. It just took a very long time to get past that. And I had been getting past that a little bit better. And then this diagnosis happened. And then I just sort of felt like, well, you know what? Whatever I'm going to do at this point is good enough, because, maybe my best performances are behind me, is kind of a thought that I had. But that's turned out to not be true, because at least two of the magic times have been since that diagnosis. One was the Brahms, the other was Poulenc Gloria at Symphony Hall, with Bramwell Tovey conducting the Boston University Symphony Orchestra. So I'm not quite done yet, maybe, but it's made it much easier. This brain tumor has made it much easier to let go of that perfectionism, much easier to just enjoy the performance that I'm doing, and to really live that truth, that if you love what you're doing and you are fully in the moment of what you're doing, other people will be moved by that, and will relate to that better than if they see you trying to be anxious and perfectionistic all the time. So it's been a huge blessing to feel like I have done a lot of my best singing since this happened. Because I wrote in the book about a recital I did about 2 months before the diagnosis, and it's still one of my favorite recordings. That recital, it was really beautifully recorded. The pianist Kevin Jones is just outstanding. We've collaborated for many years as well, and that I felt in a certain way like that was the last performance where I had just a total physical confidence that I didn't have after the diagnosis. But when I compare those recordings to ones that I'm doing now, I definitely hear the depth of maturity that I have now, even if it's not as perfect, and whatever that means, in as it was on that recording. So it's something we struggle with all our lives as musicians.
Absolutely. We both are educators, and I know that we both know that talking to our students about personal things can be, as you say in your book, kind of a slippery slope. How did you manage to maintain personal boundaries and while at the same time sharing this life-changing experience that you had with your students?
Yeah, great question. I've written a lot about that in my first two books, The Singer's Ego and The Teacher's Ego. I'm the kind of teacher I've always tried to be, is the kind of teacher that I had the good fortune to study with, you and Lois Fard, and various other people who encouraged me uh, to be a real human being. Martha Hill, Jackson Hill, I mean, all the folks at Bucknell, Jim Jordan, all the people who were around me during that formative time, that I now realize how special that is, and how unusual that environment maybe was, and because I don't think everyone has that in their young life, having that many teachers who are really concerned with the holistic person. And especially back in the mid 80s when I was in school, that was pretty cutting edge for you guys to be as as forthright about that, and I forever appreciate that. um so I've always tried to be that kind of teacher, and I expect if I'm going to expect my singers to be vulnerable and be honest as performers, then I can't hide from them. And so for me, it was never a question that I was going to tell them about it, and there was no way to not. I mean, I taught the first day of that semester, and the next day I went in and had brain surgery. So and I came back. It takes a surprisingly short amount of time to recover from brain surgery, believe it or not. And I was back maybe about maybe 2 weeks later, and of course I had a huge scar on my head, and I had to explain why I missed the first 2 weeks of school. Like, Peanut, that's not normal for me. I'm a pretty type A teacher. I don't miss school for no reason. So I wore a cap that day to school, and I told them as a studio, and I waited till I had the information I needed to. I waited till I knew what the diagnosis was to tell them anything about it. And I waited till after the surgery. They didn't know anything before that. And they were pretty great about it. And I there was no way to hide it. And so I tried to be, and I didn't tell them every single detail, and I didn't tell anyone every single detail. A lot of the details are in this book, and people around me are reading it saying, I had no idea that this was as crazy as it was. And I said, well, now because I didn't, you don't want to tell people every little thing. So I didn't tell my students every little thing, but I did feel like there was no way to not tell them about something like that, especially when I was going to be going through treatment and still teaching during the treatment. I pushed aside all my other things. I canceled some performances I had coming up. I just told them, your lessons are my priority this semester. And I was trying to pretend everything was as normal as possible. So and probably I should have taken a little more time off, but that was what I needed to do. And reading about other people in that situation, a lot of people apparently have the same reaction that I did. Keep trying to work and keep trying to do, those students, though, they gave me lifeblood. I mean, they were so great about it, and they were so compassionate, and just their hope for their own futures, just seeing that on display every day was enormously helpful, and still is.
Yeah, I'm sure it was for them, because you're that kind of human being, and they know that. And so for you to open up to them that way, just brings more connection into your studio, even when you're teaching. So yeah, amazing. And when I got halfway through the book, I realized you had sung Mendelssohn's Elijah with us in the fall of 2015. And then, and I'm one of those people that say, oh my God, I didn't know. A little over a year later, you were diagnosed with an abdominal tumor. Luckily, it was benign. But tell us a bit about that experience and how you related it. And I thought this was great, how you related it to basketball and to the number 22.
Yeah. So, it was a strange thing. I had started writing this book already, and then that happened. And you know, in the book was really about how much better my life is because this happened, and then this other tumor happened, and all of a sudden I was nostalgic for the time when all I had to worry about was a brain tumor. So that was the thing. But you know, in the hospital, I actually felt bad for the poor resident that had to tell me, because he sat down, closed the door. Well, it's not diverticulitis, and I was like, that's good, right? And he said, you know, he told me I had this large tumor. They couldn't agree. They still don't agree on where the thing originated, but because it was so large by the time they took it out, you know, when they first saw it, they said it was 22 centimeters wide, and that 22 was my dad's basketball number. And we have a thing in our family about the number 22. It comes up all the time in our lives, and it's really, we always sort of wave to dad when we see that number. um so I thought, well, that's interesting. I find out about this thing and it's 22. By the time they took it out, I think it was closer to 32. I forget what the number is, but offhand, but it was a lot bigger by then. And they said that the surgeon said it was literally basketball sized. So I had a small chuckle about that too, because so you know it was. But that took me out of school for longer, because major abdominal surgery, you know, you can't just jump back up. And so I missed a lot of things. You know, I missed a student of mine who was in the Met regional competition. I missed some things that I really wanted to see. Um, so that was very frustrating for me to be sitting on my couch dealing with yet another situation like this. Even though they haven't worried about this as much, it's still, you know, I'm still going through, you know, more frequent checkups about that. Um, the first thing I sang right after that was a piece that I had done years ago and been really unhappy with my performance of it. And so when Jamie Kirsch asked me to do the C minor mass, the Mozart, in April, and the surgery was in, you know, February, I thought, well, I can probably do this. And you know, but it was, and I thought, what did I just do? That's insane. Um, but I did it, and I sang really well, and I feel really good about that. So sometimes life gives you little blessings.
It sure does. It sure does. And as you think about your life and how the power of music and your faith has guided you, um, and you've described a lot of this as we've been talking, but what changes do you see in yourself now, and what can you say to those who are also facing life's precariousness? I chuckled when I uh, read in your book, and this was all in caps, things I would never have done before the brain tumor. And I'm sure that that's true. You know, you've opened yourself up in so many ways, and now, you know, your faith carried you through in your music and all of this. And so, yeah, what changes?
Oh my gosh, it's hard to even know where to start, because
I know.
I'm a lot more forgiving of myself, and hopefully of other people as well. You know, my publisher, Alec Harris, he asked me, the chapter on students is in the book because he asked me to add a chapter about that, because he wanted to know more about how it affected my teaching. He wanted to know in particular if I had become more or less patient with my students because of this. And I think, you know, I'm definitely more patient their with their worries and their things that are troubling them. And I think with other people too. I think I'm just more aware that people are going through all kinds of things that you just don't even know what they are. So that's, I'm more patient about that. I'm a little less patient with them about not practicing or not taking their work seriously, because they think they have all the time in the world, and we know that you don't necessarily have all the time in the world. So I'm a little, you know, be excellent now is what I want them for them. um you know, for myself, you know, I definitely, I'm more forgiving about things, but I also pushed myself to finish things that I pushed myself to finish this book. I really wanted it to be done. Because I know that I don't, and we all know that we don't have endless time, but you don't, I really know that now. And so now you know, I make sure that the things that I choose to do within my professional and personal life are things that I really want to do. And I say no more often to stuff that I just don't, that's not going to, you know, make my life better to take that on. So I just say no to that. So that is better. I definitely feel less, I'm much more comfortable with uncertainty than I used to be, because I just have to be. These tumors, the kind of tumor I have, it could be decades and I could die of something else at old age, or it could come back, in a couple months. There's no way to know. They don't think it will. It's knock on wood, everything's been going really, really well, but they just don't know. My doctor always says anything can happen. And, it took a while to get to a point where I wasn't sort of waking up every day thinking about that. And now I don't, but I do, um, want to do things, and I'm braver about things that I took a Zumba class outside here on the Esplanade, not this past summer, because of course everything, nothing could happen this summer, but a year ago summer, I went to this outdoor Zumba class. That's the kind of thing I would never have done before this happened. Not by myself. I just went down there. I almost chickened out. And I thought, no, I really want to do this. It's a beautiful night. It's going to be fun. I don't know how to do Zumba, but I've done a lot of jazzercise. I should be all right, right? I took dance classes. It'll be fun. It'll be something. And I went out there, and most people were there by themselves, and everybody was having a great time, and nobody cared how they looked, and it was super fun. And I look forward to the city being open again and being able to do that again. Um, but certainly through this pandemic, it's made, we're all living with an unbelievable amount of uncertainty, and that it, it's been a little easier for me because of everything else I've been through, because I really understand that nothing is permanent, not even this pandemic, not even the way, things are locked down a little bit more than we'd all like, and the performance world is hanging by a thread. Um, but I believe it's going to come back. I believe that this where we are now is not permanent, because nothing's permanent. It just
Right. When I asked Lynn if she would have this conversation with me, I asked her at the same time if she would be willing to sing, and she very graciously accepted. So, Lynn, I'm so pleased that you're willing to do this. After you've talked now for 30 minutes, what are you going to sing for us?
I'm going to sing "Will You" from the musical Grey Gardens, which this is one of my favorite pieces, and it's my go-to encore. I just love it and think it's timely, and I hope you enjoy hearing it.
Thank you.
When lilacs return in spring, will you? When larks in the meadow sing, will you? When clouds of a summer storm dissolve and starlight shimmers through, will you? When wild geese of autumn fly, will you? As I lay there wondering why, will you? Time rushes by, memories fade, dreams never do. I will be ever true. Will you?
Lynn, that was so gorgeous. And so this is my time to kind of tear up too. Oh gosh, we have so many memories. And, you know, I'm just so grateful that we've had the opportunity to have you come and sing, and that you and I have been friends for all these years. It's meant a lot to me, and it was devastating for me to realize that no, I didn't know a lot of this stuff about you, because that's the kind of person you are. Um, you and so thank you thank you for this interview. I was hoping maybe I'd see one of your cats kind of go by. Because I know you have 3. Do you have 3?
I have 2, and they don't enjoy my singing. It's too loud. They run, and I think they all day I'm here, of course, teaching remotely, and when they hear other voices on the computer, they run. So
They're out of there. Yeah. And I assume you're safe and healthy now during this pandemic. And certainly there's a lot of uncertainty. And I know that it's affected you. And that's why I'm doing these interviews and these conversations with professional singers and other professional musicians, conductors, composers, because it's hit everyone. And I know that my own singers really miss it, that connectedness. I assume now, are you teaching totally virtually, or do you go into your studio?
no, we're not doing any on-campus singing at BU. BU is running a hybrid model, but since all I do is voice, I'm home all the time. So yeah.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Lynn. And I hope, if I were to ask you what you would like to sing with us next, what would you say? I'm kind of putting you on the spot.
Oh gosh, well, you and I have never done that full length together, and I would love to sing that with you.
I would love to do that with you too. It's gorgeous soprano solos in that. And I've also considered Annalise, only if you would do the part.
Oh my gosh, that would be first on my list, really, but I know that's a very large undertaking, and so I don't want to
Yeah,
beg any.
it is.
I'd be thrilled to do that with you as well. That even more so, because that piece is just, both these pieces are great, but that piece is particularly near and dear to my heart now more than ever. So yeah, I'd be happy to do that.
That'd be great. We'll look forward to having you back, Lynn. Thank you so much.
you.
Mwah.